So, what does trauma dysregulation look like? You hear fight, flight, or freeze, but this fourth category of fawn has recently been added, I would say, in the last probably 10 years or so, that really gives us an understanding of this, fourth group of individuals that may not appear on the surface as though they're displaying a trauma response. They may just simply be described as shy, passive, weak, whatever words are used to describe them, but in reality, sometimes those display behaviors and the way in which that person is interacting with the world can indicate perhaps some experiences with trauma and traumatic stress. So you can, look at these different categories and get a sense, for example, in fight, this is where we see, those anger outbursts. For example, Nola, our older adult client from our opening vignettes of different types of trauma. Remember, she had been sexually assaulted by an aide. And so, the primary response, trauma response that she has developed, and maybe this is due to loss of some language, vocabulary, but she's developed this response of fighting whenever aides are trying to undress her, to bathe her. So it's not just, we don't just see that fight in like young children and adolescents. We can definitely also see that in adults as well. We also have flight, and this is where we see individuals that have this dual diagnosis of perhaps PTSD and then also OCD as well, because PTSD is an anxiety disorder. So it makes sense that there could be a co-occurring another anxiety disorder as well. These are also individuals that are described as workaholics, the perfectionist to a fault, to the point where it's pervasive or it's a personality trait. Basically, what they are escaping is vulnerability, imperfection, any threats to the way in which they are able to control how they present, how well they do, etc. And this could be in their personal life, in their professional life. It could be at their role as a parent and their role as an employee, etc. And then we also have freeze. This is where typically we see that people may arrive at a stage in life where, they do not have really good executive functioning skills. They're not really good at problem solving. They may have some inattention problems. This is where we see maybe some dual diagnosis of some neurocognitive like ADD, ADHD, and combination of trauma. So this is where the freeze response may represent in inattention, spacing out, not being able to organize and use those executive functioning skills. So to remember that triune brain and how all three, the neocortex, the limbic system, and the reptilian brain all have to be working in tandem successfully. Otherwise, there's kind of like on an assembly line, if there's a cog in the system, everything else just kind of gets backed up. Yeah, Allison, it is interesting when we look at, obviously with DBT or with BPD, excuse me, borderline personality disorder, we know that about half of people with that diagnosis do have a trauma history. We also can look at some other personality disorders and make a connection between trauma, history, especially CPTSD, and the emergence of a personality disorder. So it's interesting when we look at the connection. We're going to look at a slide here on the 4F trauma personality types. And I think that's where this point is going to become more solidified, that personality disorders we're finding have more and more of there's this biosocial theory, right? There's the biological influences and then also the social or environmental influences as well. Yeah, I would agree, Jessica. Fawn, definitely we could classify like that avoidant personality disorder. Also, maybe I would say, yeah, and like histrionic would be like in flight category. Obviously, your antisocial is going to be in the fight category, and that means the antisocial person, then it may not be physically fighting, but they are emotionally, strategically fighting. And that's the way they are navigating the world. So it's really interesting when we kind of look at these connections. And then fawn, which is kind of our newest one, which is, these are people pleasers. These are people that stay in violent, abusive, oppressive relationships, people that have little to no boundaries, or yes people. easily exploited. And whether they're 9 years old or 59 years old, this can be present in any age individuals.